Chapter 2, Year 6, The Path Forward. The Celeste glided silently through the stars, its hull cutting through the vast empty reaches of space. For the crew aboard, the mission had long settled into routine. It had been 6 years since they left Earth, and the dream of Orban loomed in the far future, a distant goal that none aboard would live to see. They were the foundation layers, the first generation to make sacrifices for the survival of those yet unborn. The ship's population was a mix of the best and brightest minds from Earth, representing all walks of life. Engineers, scientists, doctors, farmers, and artists. But they also carried the ideological baggage of their past lives. Some believed in pushing the boundaries of what humanity could become, while others clung to the belief that there was something essential about being human, something that shouldn't be tampered with. And at the center of it all was Dr. Adrian Valen, who firmly believed that humanity's survival on Orban would depend on its ability to adapt physically, mentally, and genetically. In the sterile glow of the laboratory, Adrian Valen and Elias stood side by side, examining the latest data. The room hummed softly with the sound of machinery, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and metal. On the screen before them was the blueprint of humanity's future, a genetic map designed to enhance physical capabilities. Stronger muscles, denser bone structures, faster reflexes. Elias glanced over at Adrian. "Are you sure about this one, Doctor? Physical enhancements are a bigger leap than immune boosts. People will notice." Adrian didn't look up from the display. "They'll notice, yes, but they'll also understand. We're not preparing for a life on Earth anymore. Orban is different. If we don't push ourselves to the limits of what we can be, we won't survive the planet's gravity, its atmosphere. These enhancements will make sure our descendants have a fighting chance." Elias nodded slowly. He had always been loyal to Adrian, but the recent debates had begun to stir doubts in his mind. Elena Kren and Jonas Tai were right to worry about the divide forming between those who had undergone enhancements and those who hadn't. But Elias knew the stakes. He knew what Adrian was trying to achieve. "Elena and Jonas are on board with the immune and adaptive enhancements," Elias said quietly. "But they're worried about the physical changes. They're concerned it will create a different class of humans, something no longer human." Adrian turned, his expression unreadable. "We're all going to change, Elias, whether we like it or not. The question is, will we control that change, or will it control us? Orban isn't going to accommodate our frailties. If we don't become the best possible version of ourselves, we're dooming our descendants to failure." Elias looked away, feeling the weight of Adrian's words settle on him. He had heard the arguments from both sides, but Adrian's certainty was hard to argue against. "Let's take a break," Adrian said, sensing the tension in the room. "We'll present this to the council soon. They'll have to decide whether these enhancements are acceptable." Later that evening, Elias wandered into one of the Celeste's common areas, a dimly lit bar where the crew often gathered to unwind. He hadn't planned on seeing anyone in particular, but as fate would have it, Elena and Jonas were seated at a table, deep in conversation. Elias hesitated for a moment before walking over. "Elena, Jonas," he greeted them, sliding into an empty seat. "I didn't expect to see you here." Elena smiled faintly, but her eyes were tired. "We all need to unwind, Elias, especially with what's coming." Jonas gestured to the drinks on the table. "Join us. We were just talking about." "Well, Elias nodded. "The enhancements," Jonas leaned forward, his expression serious. "We're not against the immune system changes or the cognitive boosts. We get it, those are necessary to survive. But physical enhancements? That's a different line to cross. Once you start making people stronger and faster, you're creating a class of people who are no longer human. What happens to the rest of us? How do we keep up?" Elena chimed in. "Part of being human is dealing with limitations, overcoming flaws. It's what makes us who we are. If we remove that, what's left is uniform." Elias listened carefully. He had heard these arguments before, but now, sitting across from them, He felt the weight of their concerns more deeply. "I don't disagree with you," Elias said slowly. "But Adrian makes a good point too. Orban is going to be tough. If we're not physically ready for it, we're setting ourselves up for failure." Alina shook her head. "Being ready doesn't mean abandoning what makes us human." A few days later, Elias found himself in Adrian's lab again, the tension between them still unresolved. He had told Adrian about the conversation with Alina and Jonas, and though Adrian listened, it was clear that his mind hadn't changed. "We can't afford to be divided on this, Elias," Adrian said, his tone firm. "We need to be unified in our purpose. If we're not preparing ourselves now, we're leaving future generations to suffer." "I understand that," Elias said, "but there's real concern. Physical enhancements might push people too far." Adrian paused for a moment, then turned to face Elias fully. "I've undergone enhancements myself. You know that. I'm stronger, more resilient. But I haven't lost anything, Elias. I'm still me." Elias considered Adrian's words, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on him. Adrian had always been the voice of reason, the one pushing for progress. And deep down, Elias knew he couldn't ignore the logic of his argument. "Let me offer you the enhancements," Adrian said quietly. "See for yourself." Elias looked at Adrian for a long moment before nodding. "Okay." The next week, the ship was in an uproar. A beloved council member, Agatha Trell, had passed away unexpectedly from an illness that had swept through the unenhanced portion of the crew. It was a somber reminder of the dangers they faced in deep space. But now, there was another problem. The council seat was vacant, and an election would need to be held to fill it. The names of the candidates were soon announced, Elias and Jonas. The crew was divided. Some believed that Elias, with his enhancements, represented the future. Others sided with Jonas, who held on to the belief that humanity needed to retain its natural form. As the news spread, whispers filled the halls. The debate was scheduled, and the tension aboard the Celeste was palpable. In the days leading up to it, the crew buzzed with speculation. Would they vote for progress and strength, or for the preservation of humanity's original form? On the day of the debate, the common area was filled with crew members. The air was thick with anticipation as Elias and Jonas took the stage, facing each other under the harsh lights. Jonas spoke first, his voice calm but passionate. "We've always been a species that thrives through our flaws. It's those limitations that push us to innovate, to overcome. If we start modifying ourselves physically, we lose what makes us human. We become something else, something disconnected from the very essence of who we are. Do we really want to go down that path?" The crowd murmured in agreement, and Jonas continued. "We can survive without sacrificing our humanity. The immune and cognitive enhancements are enough. We don't need to turn ourselves into something unrecognizable." Elias listened quietly before stepping forward to speak. His voice was steady but filled with conviction. "I understand the fear of losing our humanity. But let me tell you what I've seen. I've undergone enhancements, and I can tell you, I haven't lost who I am. If anything, I've become more capable. And that's what we need, capable people who can survive Orban's harsh conditions." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "We're not abandoning who we are. We're ensuring that future generations live. What happened to Agatha is a reminder of how fragile we are. We can't afford to be weak, not when the survival of humanity is at stake." The room fell into a heavy silence as the two men stepped back, their words lingering in the air. The election was held a few days later. Tension ran high as the votes were counted. When the results were finally announced, the room was silent for a moment. Elias had won. The margin was close, but it was enough. The enhanced candidate had taken the seat on the council. In the aftermath, Elena and Jonas stood together in one of the quieter corridors, their faces etched with concern. The sounds of celebration could be heard echoing from the common areas where Elias and his supporters were gathering. But for Elena and Jonas, the outcome of the election felt more like the beginning of the end. "This is it, isn't it?" Elena said quietly, her voice tinged with sadness. "The shift we've been fearing. The enhanced are starting to take control." Jonas crossed his arms, his gaze distant. "It's not just about the council seat, Elena. This is the first real sign that the balance is tipping. People are starting to believe that enhancements are the only way forward." Elena nodded slowly. "We tried to warn them, but maybe it's too late." Jonas didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked out through the viewport at the distant stars, the vast unknown stretching out before them. Orban was still far away, a world none of them would ever set foot on. But the decisions they made now would shape the lives of those who would eventually call it home. "We can't give up," Jonas said finally, his voice resolute. "We have to keep fighting for what we believe in. There's still a chance to preserve what makes us human, even if the rest of the crew can't see it yet." Elena looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You're right, we can't let this be the end." As the two of them stood there, the weight of the coming years pressed heavily on their shoulders. This election was just the beginning. The real fight for humanity's future had only just begun.